Hello, listeners.
Hello.
And welcome to your favourite movie podcast, Kino Inferno. I am the smooth cherry liqueur known as Aidan Barkadine.
And I am the fuzzy little man peach known as Mark Smith.
Oh, I thought you were going to say the £1 Carlsberg known as Mark Smith.
£1 Carlsbergs, what a throwback to our uni days.
I know,
remember that?
I know. That was before the war.
I went back to that bar a couple of years ago after it changed hands, and I was like, "Oh, I'll get a £1 Carlsberg, £3, livid,
£3.
£3 fucking pound."
Well, that's Johnson's Britain for you, mate. That's Tory. That's Tory Britain all over.
Can't even have a £1 Carlsberg anymore.
Probably Brexit, no. Where's Carlsberg coming from?
It's Danish, because they have Mads Mikkelsen doing the adverts.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
There you go. That's how you know something is Danish. If it's endorsed by Mads Mikkelsen, it has to be Danish.
He endorses Danish pastries as well.
And cannibalism, mostly cannibalism.
Yeah, he loves cannibalism.
He does just love eating people.
That's why they cast him in Hannibal, because he's a real cannibal.
It's an actual cannibal.
I was going to say he's a live-action cannibal, but that doesn't make any sense. On this podcast, we don't just discuss cannibalism. We also discuss cinema.
Very good, very good. I enjoyed that.
Am I good enough for what culture yet? Or am I still too sloppy?
Well, I mean, they hired me, so who knows?
They did.
Anyway.
£1, if they've hired the £1 Carlsberg, why don't they hire the £2 Grolsch?
I have already established I'm a fuzzy little man peach. I'm not going to be your bargain basement beer, okay?
Anywho, we discuss movies on this podcast, famously. Today is no different. We're discussing two films linked by a theme, and the theme is
good, bad sequels. And what we mean by that is sequels that are considered bad, possibly by fans, critics, the people that, don't really matter because it's our opinions that we're going to be spouting today.
I think my choice is considered bad by critics, I believe, in the main. Fans, not so much. Your choice is more debatable among the fans, I would say.
Critics weren't too keen on it either. It's currently sits around the 40% mark, which I think is criminally low, to be honest.
I need to look up what Crank 2 got on the Rotten Tomatoes. I didn't look this up. Don't
worry, I've got it up right here.
Always got it up, listeners.
Do you know what? Weirdly, Crank 2 has a 64% on Rotten Tomatoes.
I bet that's retroactive, though, because I feel like it has a cult following now.
However, on the cinema score, it has an audience score of a C-.
That's outrageous.
Yeah, weirdly. So critics thought Crank 2 was better than what audiences did, which, given we're about to discuss Crank 2, you'll probably understand why. That is surprising and shocking that audiences didn't like it as much as critics did.
If Jason Statham was here, he'd go, "That's fucking shocking, you can."
He'd just call everyone a cunt and leave, I think.
He would, which is how we like him. Well, anyway, without further ado, Mark, why don't we get into the first film, which is 2009's Crank 2 High Voltage.
My name is Chev Chelios, and today I didn't die. It's storm hot. Why not just let me die?
They were keeping you alive to farm your organs.
They gave you an artificial heart?
Yeah.
How many bars does the battery show?
One.
You got 1 hour. Keep your body electrically charged to keep it pumping. If you can get hold of your heart, I'm reasonably sure I can put it back in.
Just me.
Crank 2 is the second chapter in the saga of Chev Chelios, a man who in this film has his heart forcibly replaced with an Aviacore total artificial heart by a Chinese triad, which requires electricity to keep going. Hence the name the subtitle High Voltage. He escapes the triad and searches for his heart, encountering more gangsters, a deranged Asian hooker, and numerous methods of keeping his electric heart going, all of which stretch credulity to breaking point. So, I mean, that's as much plot as Crank 2 has, really. We start off with Chev Chelios falling from a plane, which was how we left him at the end of Crank 1. He plummets down, he hits the road. You'd think he's dead, he's not. A Chinese triad immediately picks him up, because that's how Chev Chelios' life plays out. He has his heart entirely removed, replaced with the artificial heart, which requires initially an external lithium battery, which then gets lost, so he has to find numerous more ingenious ways to keep the electricity pumping through his body. Which is kind of like that. That's how so the first movie, he's like the bus from Speed. He can't let his heart rate drop below a certain level, or this toxin takes over his body. In this movie, he's got to keep the electricity going, or his heart will just stop and he'll die. So that's that. So that's happening. That's stressful. Basically, his dick is also going to get cut off at one point, and at that point, Chev decides enough is enough, breaks free from the triad, and then the rest of the movie is essentially just things happening to him.
And him just finding, like you say, more and more ways of keeping himself juiced up, which... I mean...
whilst he searches for his jam tart, as he calls it, his heart.
And I feel like the final line of your summary just sums up this movie perfectly, saying it stretches credulity, because that is... This entire fucking movie is stretching the credulity of anybody that was involved in it.
Yeah, frankly, I'm shocked that this movie exists in the form that it does.
I'm amazed that this movie exists in the modern era.
Yeah, because the first thing we should say, we mentioned the Chinese triad, right? We should get this off the bat straight away. This movie is offensive on almost every level.
And to pretty much every creed, it's offensive to.
To every creed, to every gender going. I mean, well... If it was if they make Crank 3, which they keep threatening to do, I imagine there'll be some transphobic content for us all to enjoy. But there's some racist content in this, especially against the Chinese. But the Mexicans get a good hiding as well. Mm-hmm. In fairness, the British don't come off looking too good either.
No, because Jason Statham is just the most stereotypical British football hooligan type there
all
is.
British people represented in the Crank universe are football hooligans. Yeah. Even Jerry Halliwell is a football hooligan in this.
What the fuck was Jerry Halliwell doing in this movie?
We'll get there.
We will get there, because that was something. Like, there's a lot of stuff in this movie that had me baffled, but that is one of the things that baffled me the most.
Yeah, we will get there, my friend. Yes, we should say deep, bafflingly racist Chinese stuff going on. To the point where there's bits with guys running around with fucking lampshade hats on and shit. And bear in mind, this is set in just modern day LA.
Yes, it's set in like an undisclosed location, really, isn't it? Like,
yeah.
Like, it's supposed to be LA because that's where the first movie is set.
It was shot in LA.
Yeah. But they don't really specify where exactly this one takes place.
No, it's set in Chaos Land.
Yeah, like it's... Because there's times where, like, looking at the sort of, like, melting pot of, like, different, like, races and cultures, I'm like, at one point I was like, oh, is this supposed to be, like, New Mexico? It kind of gives you vibes of New Mexico. And then I was like, okay, is it actually Mexico? Or, like... I struggle to keep up with this movie. It probably doesn't help that everything is so desaturated as well.
Yeah, the camera style is, like... Everything's super desaturated, but also pretty much the entire movie is shot on handheld cameras.
For some reason.
Which are then also edited between, like, there won't be any shot. There's no shot reverse shot in this movie. It's just random shots edited chaotically together, to emulate the level of stress that Chev Chelios is in, but also it creates a migraine-like effect when you're watching this movie.
One thing I'll say about this movie is, if I was to describe it in one word, it's ugly, and that applies to the way it looks, the overall like tone of it. It's actual disdain for anybody. I was like, oh, it's just got disdain for anyone that's not white. But I was like, no, all the white people in this movie are absolute pieces of shit as well.
Yeah, and this is one of the most misanthropic movies ever made.
Genuinely, like, it's a deeply unpleasant watch, in my opinion.
Yes, and yet there is something about it. There's some magic to the movie.
Really has a charm. And I think it might be in the fact that it's so far beyond the pale when it comes to being offensive. Because, it's like you say, it's quite racist, it's misogynistic, it's homophobic. It's also...
This is the kind of movie where if a woman appears, it's like a countdown clock until her tits come out.
Literally. Or in, that one stripper's case, her tits literally come out of her tits. Her tits spill forth.
This features a stripper being shot in the fake tits, and then the tits exploding.
There are so many stripper deaths in this movie as well, I want to point out. I actually lost count.
Yeah. Strippers in the Crank universe are often used as human shields. Just collateral damage.
So I feel like we've kind of jumped straight into like everything that's kind of wrong with this movie.
The crankosity.
The crankosity. Because, I mean, we were talking about this earlier. Like, I've not seen the first movie for quite some time. I do mostly remember it, but I've not seen it for a
neither.
while.
I mean, this is the thing. If you jump straight into Crank 2, it's fine, because whenever a character appears from Crank 1, they immediately show fast cut flashback to their role in Crank 1. Up to and including fucking Dennis from It's Always Sunny.
Oh, Glenn Hauser, yes. I completely forgot that he was in the first movie, and because he has like a really small scene, doesn't he? And he basically, I think he has like essentially the same amount of screen time in the sequel.
So in the first movie, Chev, he's like a doctor or a male nurse or something, and Chev holds him up at gunpoint for various reasons. And then in this movie, we see him in therapy after the events of the first movie, with his therapist being outrageously horny towards him. I mean, I wrote down some of the dialogue.
What was that about?
I wrote down some of the dialogue.
Also, can we appreciate that he was in therapy in his scrubs as well?
Yes, he was, just so we know it's the same guy. Yeah, so the therapist is telling him that he has to go out there and, experience life, by which she means having sex with a whore, which keeps saying. She says you got to get some stinky pussy in your face at one point. To which he starts getting excited and responds with, I'm going to go out and floss my teeth with some pubes. And this is something about the Crank universe, or so certainly as it's presented in Crank 2, is it is the most intensely horny and aggro universe in the world. Everyone is at full levels at all times.
Like everybody's full mast and ready to fight people.
Yeah, I mean, even the newsreaders in this universe, because like the movie starts with a news report about Chev Chelios falling from the sky, right, as he was battling the Mexican dude at the end of the first one, and the news report ends with the guy saying, "Well, reports of a second body have been filed by X amount of people," and he just goes, "But we've dismissed it for the bullshit that it probably is." Those exact words. It's like everyone in this universe is just aggro to it. Because there's also a bit where two homosexuals are walking a dog in the park, and Chev approaches them to retrieve the shock collar to keep his heart going. And apropos of nothing, not even knowing that Chev is approaching them, but seeing just Chev in the park, one of the gay guys just goes, "Oh, who's this asshole?"
I feel like his presence just announces itself. Like, I feel like, have you ever seen Trigun? That anime Trigun.
Yeah.
He is literally, is it Dash the Destroyer? Vash the Destroyer? He's just that guy.
I can't remember, but the main guy from that,
He's just, everywhere he goes, just destruction happens.
Yeah, he's a shit magnet, as one character says to him later.
And also, one thing I've wanted to point out as well is the amount of cameos in this movie. Because we mentioned Jerry Halliwell earlier, which is just a weird as fuck cameo as it is.
Who briefly plays Chev Chelios' mum in a flashback? Question mark?
Or like some kind of weird fucked up fantasy sequence.
We'll get to it. Because we're definitely going to discuss that soon.
But you mentioned the two gay guys in the park, one of whom is played by Maynard James Keenan, who is the lead singer of Tool.
Yes.
So that was a weird surprise.
There's also a bizarre cameo at the racetrack from the late, great Chester Bennington.
Yeah, who Jason Statham just has to rub up against to get some friction. Because
and I want to know how these guys ended up getting roped into this movie, because maybe they loved the first one.
Possibly, I think it's a money thing, because this is something else that I looked into. So we mentioned how fucking ugly and visually unappealing this movie is. I thought
purposefully so.
It must have been purposeful. But also, I looked at the budget. So the first Crank movie was made for $12 million. And that movie doesn't look terrible. It's a bit rough around the edges, but it doesn't look terrible. This movie's budget was $20 million.
Wow.
They had $8 million more to play with, and somehow this movie was shot on the same sort of cameras that when we were film students that we were using.
Well, you say for some reason. I know the exact reason.
I did look it up as well, but...
It's because when they made the first one, they destroyed many, many cameras in the process.
Oh, okay, I didn't know that.
And they did on this one as well. So they ended up filming this movie on the cheapest cameras they could that would produce a decent quality. In this case, they're like the SLRs, but yeah.
See, I read that it was also because they wanted the most lightweight cameras that they could, because not only did they have like a main DOP whose name is Brandon Trost, who part of me is like, you should never work again. This movie is fucking ugly to look at. But apparently the two directors also... the writers and directors, they also manned cameras making this movie, and they wanted the most lightweight cameras they possibly could because they wanted it to be constantly like kinetic and moving. And I'm like, that's fine. Can you at least actually, master the white balance button? Like, for the fucking love of God, like, so many scenes in this movie are just like disgusting to look at. Because for a brief time, I was very much interested in cinematography and wanted to go down that path. And even though I don't really do that much anymore, this movie upset me on a visual level. It honestly upset me. To the point where it was detrimental to my enjoyment of it, despite the fact that I do think, despite how offensive and horrible and gross and unnecessary this movie is, it's a fucking good time, and I really kind of hate how much I like it.
I mean, yeah, I think it's deliberately kind of abrasive on every level, including visual. Because I know what you mean. I could put it with the desaturated look and everything, but yeah, the editing is what kind of makes this film so unhinged. Because as we say, like, there's no shot reverse shot kind of logic. It just kind of frenetically cuts between close up, wide shot, close up, wide shot. It's just like insane levels of. I mean, you're supposed to be kind of in the moment with Chev Chelios, I guess, as his electrified heart is going at a rate of knots. We should probably try and explain some of what happens in this movie to people who haven't seen it.
I think it's almost impossible to explain some of what happens in this movie. It's just a sequence of events where Chev basically runs into like gangsters or some other undesirables. They have a bit of a scrap.
Because we should say there's a Mexican gang who are after him.
There are the triads as well.
Partially. So the Mexican gang want revenge on him for the events of the first movie, because he killed one of, as it turns out, three brothers who all have the same name.
He killed two of three brothers, didn't he?
Yeah, he killed two of them in the first movie. That's right. And then the ferret in this one is the third brother, which you don't really need to know. Can we just talk about the ferret for a second, though? Because that is one of the strangest performances in this movie.
Yeah, the ferret who has a thing for making his henchmen cut off their own nipples. Yeah.
I mean, that was the Mark Smith role in this movie. If he wasn't Mexican, I think you would have played that role.
I would be honoured to play the ferret. I really would. No, yeah, he's an interesting villain who is sort of mentioned early in the movie, but isn't really introduced until like over halfway through. And his introductory scene is where he makes that guy slice his nipples off. Which I have a slight funny story about that. When I watched the other film for this episode, when I watched Jurassic Park 3, after it finished, I just had a flicking through TV, and weirdly, Crank High Voltage was on TV after I finished watching Jurassic Park 3. And
as it should be.
And I was like, well, it's getting late. I can't stay up and watch the whole movie, but I'll flick it on quickly. And just as I turned it on, that dude was lopping his nipples off. And
yeah, it's a crazy scene, that.
And it's just like, just coming into that, having just watched Jurassic Park 3, I was like, what the fuck is this movie? And I finished watching it last night, and I still have questions as to what the fuck is this movie.
Yeah, to be clear, for people who haven't seen it, the ferret's henchman reports that they have failed to capture Chev Chelios, to which the ferret demands he cuts both his nipples off in one go. It's pretty brutal. And then because that character is shirtless throughout the movie. So then later on you see him with just band-aids over his nipples. Which
is probably my favourite like visual gag in the entire movie, because it's just so stupid. But
I mean, there's so much in this movie that's just like, obscene.
Well, I can give you some great examples of that. So, at the very beginning, when Chev's having his heart removed, one of the villains, who I can't remember his name, he's the guy
Which
who
is just lifted. It's just lifted straight out of his chest cavity.
And also,
Which somehow doesn't kill him.
He's shown to be alive, A, after they remove his heart, and B, conscious. He's literally staring at his own heart as it's like being held in front of him for some reason.
They say in that scene he's a Superman.
Yeah, they did. And after getting to the end of this movie, I'm inclined to believe it. Like,
he is indestructible.
Clearly, like, but so he's there having just had his heart removed, and then they're going to also harvest the rest of his organs as well. And like you said, they're going to literally chop his cock off because apparently it's massive. I don't know if that was established in the first movie. I don't really remember it. But...
I don't think so, but yeah, they definitely clearly established that Poon Dong, the Chinese, the wizened old Chinese man,
played by David Carradine, which freaks me the fuck out when I realised. But then, so that happens within like the first couple of minutes where, like, yeah, he has his heart pulled out, and then they're gonna chop his dick off because there's that that nurse. I say nurse. Clearly, none of these people are qualified to be practicing medicine. There's no way that any of them are qualified. But yeah, she comes in and like looks up his like hospital gown and calls him, what was it, a big cock Englishman? She calls him.
Yes, something along those lines. Yeah.
And again, the editing is really weird. I'm not sure what she does. She either puts something up his piss hole or takes his temperature rectally, and I'm not sure which one it is. And it's very weird, and it made me very uncomfortable.
I'm not entirely sure what that was. I thought she was injecting his ballsack or something, but
you can't tell what she's doing because the editing is so chaotic.
Yeah.
But then, so that happens about 3 to 4 minutes into the actual fucking movie. 8.5 minutes. Well, no, 8 minutes 50. Sorry, not 8.5. I've got back. 8 minutes 50 in. Jason Statham dips a shotgun in. Is it oil?
Yeah,
oil. Yeah, dips it in oil and shoves it up a guy's ass.
Yes, to interrogate him.
To interrogate, of course. Why that's your first thought is to anally rape a man with a shotgun.
Well, this is Chev Chelios we're talking about.
I mean, I know he's unhinged. He is unhinged. This whole fucking movie's unhinged. But why that's his go-to, I will never know.
I mean, this movie clearly establishes he's a lifelong sociopath.
Very true. So, 15 minutes in, he loses his battery pack for his heart, which is probably the closest this movie comes to actually having some kind of stakes outside of the electro heart. He then gets a jump from these Mexican guys that are in a lowrider that's rich.
Yes, and I want to talk about this because he first of all is asking them for directions to what turns out to be a knocking shop. But he pulls up next to them and he's asking them to direct. What do they call it? They call it like the Gentleman's Club or something.
Yeah, there's like a social club, I think he calls it.
Social club, yeah. But it turns out it's like a knocking shop.
It's a big old whorehouse.
Yeah,
with so many sex workers inside it.
And when he pulls up, going, can you point me towards the such and such social club? The Mexican guy in the lowrider's like, nah, fuck that, Holmes, let's race. To which he replies, don't tempt me, fucker. It's like, what?
I love the fact that Chev would absolutely race these guys, but obviously he's got bigger things on his mind.
If he wasn't busy today, he'd absolutely drag race these gentlemen.
And I feel like with all the other bullshit that happens in this movie, we probably had time for a drag racing scene. We probably could have. And you know what? I'd have been fine with it.
But then, even more bizarre than that, yes, you're quite right. He asks them for a jump, and because his car gets fucked over. And they think he's asking for jump leads to the car, but instead he attaches one of the leads to his nip, one to his tongue, and becomes supercharged by the super electricity. So he just runs the rest of the way.
And then, upon reaching said knocking shop, liberates it. All of the prostitutes that work there are just fleeing out of this house as Chev, which we don't see because probably budget, because the rest of the budget went on disposable SLR cameras and, celebrity cameos. And so he just liberates.
And to be fair, we do see a lot of shootouts with nude women running around.
That is very true. They do make good on this lack of knocking shop liberation that we sort of teased with at that scene. What a fucking set. This fucking movie you got me to watch. Jesus Christ. So yeah, he liberates the sex workers, and then he then meets what I've got in my notes here as the best and worst character in this movie.
I think the best character in all of cinema, to be honest. Yeah, so this is Bai Ling's character, the aforementioned deranged Asian prostitute.
Her name's Rhea?
Rhea in the movie, yeah.
Yes.
I want to point something out about this. So the directors of this movie, Mark Neville-Dean and Brian Taylor, who are, up there with the Coen brothers when it comes to directing duos. They're...
I'm not even the biggest fanboy of the Coens, and even I'm deeply offended by that statement.
No, this is as good as anything the Coens have ever made.
I mean, it is on the same level as Fargo, I guess. It made me laugh as much as Fargo does.
Yeah, and this should have won Oscars as well. But no, yeah. So Bai Ling, the actress, she's been in all sorts of things. She's in The Crow and all sorts of other stuff. Mm-hmm. But she is, I don't know what the politically correct term is, but a mental case in real life. And yeah, basically the directors of this, Neville Dean and Taylor, basically said that she just made up her own dialogue pretty much. They had written lines for this character that she refused to say, and just came up with any old shit.
Which probably explains why her character has subtitles, despite the fact that she's speaking English. She's speaking very broken English, admittedly.
Yeah, and she's just shrieking any old nonsense. And because there are parts where the subtitles don't even bother to translate what she's saying.
That's very true, actually. And she's just throwing slurs around all over the place and constantly just trying to get all on Chev's dick. And she's an exhausting presence.
Calling him Kevin Costner.
Kevin Costner.
Because she becomes attached to Chev because he saves her from the life of prostitution.
Inadvertently.
Chev, but as a side product of his rampage, yeah. But Chev isn't having any of that because he's already got a woman, as we know from the first movie, which I'm sure we all remember perfectly well.
And yes,
it's Eve, played by Amy Smart. Yeah,
I just want to give a little shout out to Amy Smart. Actually, she's one of those actresses that she doesn't really crop up in much, but I've always just thought she's a really great performer, especially comedy roles as well. And I think she's kind of perfect for Eve. And
she is great, and God love her for throwing her dignity to the wind twice for these movies. Because both of these movies feature a scene where Jason Statham has to fuck her so hard his heart comes back to life. The first movie plays it kind of for dark comedy, whereas this movie just plays it for out and out TNA pretty much. And then it goes beyond that to absolute absurdity. But we'll get to that in a moment because he meets Eve. She's stripping in a strip club that he happens to go to, and they have a brilliant exchange where it turns out she's just didn't get his because there's a bit later on right after he gets her out of the strip club and everything where he's like, I called you, didn't you get my message? And then it cuts to her answer phone and it's just garbled nonsense
because obviously he's falling from the plane in the first movie.
He called her while he was falling from a plane. But in fairness to Eve, she's pretty fucking ride or die for Chev.
That's true. She's up for it.
To be fair, the quality of man that she's dealing with outside of Chev is not great.
Very true.
That guy who runs the strip club or who just put her in the strip club, he's a piece of work.
She is very ride or die for Chev, and I'm assuming it's not just for his loving, warm personality or the massive load of schmeat he's packing. He must have other qualities.
It's the constant public dickings. She's just into
She's clearly well into it.
That's an outrageous scene. So there's, oh my god. I don't even know how to describe this movie to people who haven't seen it. So one of Chev's mates is a doctor, allegedly.
Doc, as you call him?
Yeah, this is Dwight Yoakam's character. Yeah, they call him Doc Miles. I think he was in the first one. I can't remember.
He is. I will admit, I haven't seen the first one in a very, very long time. However, I read a summary on Wikipedia earlier.
Nice. So anyway, so the setup for this scene with Eve at the racetrack is that Chev calls Doc Miles explaining his replacement heart, which Doc Miles knows all about, and it segues into a brilliant animated section about it goes like a public information film about the replacement heart. It's so good. And this is one of those films where we're not going to get much insightful commentary. It's just going to be me laughing at all the bits that I find hilarious. But anyway, the point is this. he's got to generate some friction to keep this heart going. And if you've seen the first one, you know where this is going. He's going to have to shag Amy Smart until the friction gets his heart going. But before that, he rubs up on Chester Bennington, who happens to be at the racetrack. He starts molesting an old woman.
Yeah. I'm just flabbergasted by the things that happen in this movie.
Yeah. And the funniest part of all that, and this is Amy Smart sells this so well, is when she just comes in and it's like, oh, friction. Oh, I know what we need to do. Because she remembers the first movie. So they start dry humping and then they start wet humping. Much to the enjoyment of the horse racing crowd, I might add.
And may we also point out that there are horses racing on the track where they're just raw dogging.
Yeah, because one of them jumps over them whilst they're having sex.
With the most graphic close-up of a horse cock I have ever seen in a movie. And I've seen and love Freddy Got Fingered, okay?
And it's implied that Amy Smart comes because she sees the horse cock.
Because I'm guessing it reminds her of Chev.
I hope so.
Because if not...
That's an issue.
But there are many issues in this movie, and the fact that Eve might massively be into bestiality is not the most disgusting and offensive thing that happens.
Yeah, shockingly.
Shockingly.
I mean, that scene is next level, that scene. It's one of the most graphic scenes of raw dogging I've seen in a mainstream
I am
film.
pretty confident you see Jason Statham's arsehole for like a split second. I am confident that happens.
Do. You definitely do. I mean, they pixel out his knob.
They do, which is kind of weird that they like pixelate out it during because that scene is so graphic. It's still really admittedly it's really ridiculous.
I assume it's pixeled out because it's actually covered. On the set.
They're probably both wearing Birkins. Yeah. But considering how graphic that scene is, and even though it rolls straight back around to being completely absurd as well, because there's
because
nothing...
people guy throws him a fucking cowboy hat. And Amy Smart throws her knickers into the audience, and some Asian guy just grabs them and snips them. This is what I mean.
Doesn't it just feel like this film was written by teenagers? It's
mate, yeah. One of my notes is this film reeks of Axe body spray.
Just seeps out the screen.
Every single scene in this movie is tailor-made to be as obnoxious as possible. And I think that's what I like about it. It's cranked up so much. Well, it's cranked up so much that it's unbelievable. The first movie is pretty unhinged. The first movie is the kind of thing where people went, "Have you seen this movie? You'll never believe this shit," right? And they know that that's the audience they've got for the second movie by the time it rolls around. So they just went for it. Every scene, there is no time to breathe in this movie.
God, no.
There are no quiet conversation scenes. And even, there's a few conversation scenes, but even they have absolutely absurd dialogue in them.
Or the characters are doing lurid shit. Any time where, Chev is on the phone to Doc. Doc is with his lover, Dark Chocolate, I believe her name is.
Yes, Chocolate. Yeah.
That's a whole thing.
You may be able to guess from that name, listeners, she is not white.
Yes. And isn't it when he's on the phone, he's just constantly just rubbing her ass? While she's
just spanking and grabbing her ass. Yeah.
While she's just playing Mortal Kombat.
Yeah. We all know what the best dialogue scene in this movie is. It's a scene where Chev's mate from the first one, a Chinese gangster.
Yes.
You know what's coming because you know there's an audio drop coming.
Spoilers.
But okay, we should reel back a little bit before we get to the best line in cinema history. So, along the way, Chev meets a gentleman by the name of Venus, played by Efren Ramirez, who's probably best known to audiences as Pedro from Napoleon Dynamite.
Oh my god, that is him, isn't it?
Yes. He was also in the first Crank, playing the identical brother of Venus, who was unfortunately killed. Anyway, the point is this. Venus is a homosexual. He is also someone who suffers from FBT, full body Tourette's. Now, is this a sensitive portrayal of mental illness, would you say?
Oh no, this film is deeply offensive to those who suffer from neurological conditions.
Yeah. I do appreciate that it's just openly an excuse for things to just go wrong. Like, whenever he's in an action scene, he just starts...
He has his tics. Yeah.
Yes, his full body tics. It's openly just a plot excuse for him not to get one over on the bad guys repeatedly throughout the movie.
And to the point where they run that fucking joke into the ground towards the end.
They really do. They really do.
Like, you can imagine the two guys that wrote it just, like, sniggering to themselves, going like, oh, he'll just, like, have a tic, and they just keep using it.
Yes. So it shows up in an inopportune moment when they are rescued from another gang fight by a gentleman by the name of Don Kim, who appears in the first one, a Chinese gangster. Unfortunately for Venus, he has his full body spasms and lands in the crotch of one of the Chinese gangsters, who then promptly throws him from the limousine that they've just pulled him and Chev into, which prompts this line.
Your friend has the gay condition.
Which we use as an audio drop for the rest of the series whenever either of us makes an accidental homosexual innuendo.
I fully support this notion. Let us know in the comments if you do too, or if this is grossly offensive, much like Crank 2 is. We'll probably still do it anyway.
Hey, this podcast's already grossly offensive. You heard some of the things we've said?
Hey, we cut that stuff out. Going back to the plot of the movie, after this really over-the-top fucking scene, sex scene, love scene, whatever you want to call it, I'm gonna stick with fucking scene. Where do they go from there? Because
Amy Smart gets picked up by the police, and Chev continues to go on a rampage. Because the guy he thinks has his heart is the Chinese fella, is at the racetrack. Yeah, I think it leads. Hang on, I think it leads pretty much directly into the scene that I was just describing, where they get into a shootout and then some stuff happens. It's hard to remember what really happens in what order in this movie, because it's not so much, as you say, it's not so much a plot as a series of increasingly insane events.
Yeah, because he then catches up with the guy who's got his heart.
Yes.
And there is then this scene...
Well, that he thinks has his heart.
Well, he thinks has his heart, yeah. And then it leads to possibly the most baffling scene of the entire movie. And trust me when I say there are many baffling scenes. Where, so if I remember correctly, the dude who's supposedly got Chev's heart kicks him into a power grid, or like a electricity box, which then supercharges him.
They're fighting in, they're fighting in some fucking electric power grid or something like that.
It's like a power station, yeah.
Like a power station, yeah.
Which just so happens to be, round the corner from the racetrack, because geography does not matter in this movie.
No. Yeah,
and so
it's just there.
It's just there, yeah. The geography of this location, this undisclosed location, just doesn't make any sense. So they go to this power station, start having a fight. Chev gets kicked into like a power box or whatever you want to call it, and then becomes supercharged to the point where lightning shoots out of him. And then it turns into a kaiju movie?
Yeah, for some reason, it turns into a kaiju movie with guys in rubber suits of Jason Statham and the Chinese fellow. And it happens.
And they just have a bit of a scrap and, throw each other around a really poorly made miniature set of the power station. And this goes on for a couple of minutes. It's
not entirely clear if that happens in reality or not either.
It's just... and that's the point where, for the movie, I was like, right, okay, we've gone full maximum ridiculous now. There's kind of no coming back from
I like the fact that he takes the icebox that supposedly contains his heart, looks inside it, and it turns out it doesn't contain his heart. We never actually find out what it contains, but it's enough to make Chev, he balks at whatever's in there and tells the Chinese guy he's sick, he has psychological problems.
Yeah, and honestly, I'm surprised they don't go as far as showing us what was in that cooler, because obviously the movie goes out of its way to be disgusting and wrong.
I think that's what gets me about it, is like, what could possibly be in there that this movie wouldn't show it?
Yeah, clearly that's a low this movie won't sink to, and I didn't think that was possible.
Also, I've got to give props to a movie that will basically waste the audience's time to that extent, where it's pretty clearly established this guy has Chev's heart, and then he just doesn't.
Yeah, it just gives him the runaround, like this movie does to its audience.
Yeah, most of the Chinese gangster stuff is irrelevant to where Chev's heart actually is.
Because it's inside David Carradine's character, and he's out trying to score hookers.
Yeah, and he's not really relevant to the plot either, it's worth pointing out.
No, he's only in it for maybe, a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
And then towards the end, obviously we're going a bit ahead of ourselves, but he ends up picking up Chocolate, who then takes, was it Poon Dong, is that his name, or Poon Dong?
Yes, Poon Dong.
Yeah. So she just takes Poon Dong back to Doc's house, where off-screen he is clearly murdered and has his new heart removed. Because not only is Doc an ex-heart surgeon and Chev's friend, he's also a murderer.
Yeah. Well, we know the reason he got struck off from being a heart surgeon is he tried to help his, I assume, former wife with her quote-unquote vaginal regeneration, and it went wrong. So I don't know why a heart doctor's doing that for a start. But
that's some Hedwig and the Angry Inch territory. That's what that is.
It really is. I mean, I want the spin-off about Doc, to be honest, and his crazy life. I mean, one of the best lines in this movie is when he tells Chocolate to get off her fat ass and hit the streets. And she refuses, and he just goes, "Is Dog Miles going to have to choke a bitch?"
Which shouldn't be funny.
It
should
fucking
not
is.
be funny. It shouldn't be funny.
The deadpan tone that Dwight Yoakam delivers that line in is incredible.
But I do want to point one thing out before we get into talking about the ending, because the ending is where the movie, in my opinion, becomes truly, truly ridiculous and stupid.
Yeah.
Even by my standards. Is that we mentioned the kaiju bit as well, and it's really kind of obvious throughout most of the movie that they're really trying to ape video games. And I was watching this film with my housemate, who, may I point out, did not care for it.
Well, he's wrong.
Really didn't care for it.
He's simply wrong.
But at one point during watching it, I could see him getting frustrated with it, and he just asked me, "Is this supposed to be satire?" And I thought about it for a minute, and I went, "No, because there's nothing going on beneath the surface level nonsense that we're seeing. There is no core to this movie."
I think it exists just to provoke that reaction. I think it's just trying to... It's so... Like I say, this film is obnoxious. Deliberately.
Yeah, I mean, I did kind of, for a brief time, entertain the notion that maybe it was trying to satirize, because the video game motif is really rife throughout this entire film. It starts with that 8-bit reconstruction of the finale of the first movie.
Yeah.
The title card for the movie is done in an intentionally retro video game style.
Yeah.
The whole movie is very Grand Theft Auto. Down to the side characters and all that kind of stuff. It's clearly aping that stuff, but to no real end, which is kind of frustrating in my eyes. But again, I still do enjoy this movie. I'm ragging on it a bit.
But it's this thing, I see what you're saying, but I don't think it's supposed to have anything going on. It's just a mishmash of stuff. Because as we've said, it's parodying the video games and all this kind of stuff. And that's definitely part of it. But then it also does stuff like when we see a sort of fantasy scene / flashback to Chev's childhood, it's inexplicably a parody of the Jeremy Kyle show. And it's explicitly the Jeremy Kyle show as well, because everyone has British accents. And that's fucking incredible for a start. So we have a scene where, because Chev gets knocked out, and then...
Yeah, this is actually what brings us to the finale of the movie, because he gets captured.
Yes. And, we see a flashback to him and his mum, played by Jerry Halliwell, on the...
For some reason, Jerry Halliwell, I can't get over this.
On a kind of knockoff of the Jeremy Kyle show. And it just kind of shows that he's always been a deranged little cunt.
How did a Spice Girl birth Jason Statham? I just don't get it.
We'll never know. Yeah, it's just kind of a grab bag of stuff. There's a scene where, unfortunately, Ron Jeremy's in this movie, because there's a cameo of... Well, he cameo... There's a scene of, they get held up by all these porn actors who are protesting their pay, which I think was happening at the time.
Yeah, I feel like that's definitely got its basis in something, because that feels too specific to have just been pulled out of thin air.
Yeah, I mean that's
and also because nothing comes of it as well. Nothing really comes of that scene.
It's just a way for them to be held up in traffic.
And to just go, hey, look, porn actors.
Yeah. Because there's unfortunately Ron Jeremy and there's a couple of other people who I didn't recognise, but they're one girl gets on the hood of the car and of course starts shaking her tits about. One of the other male porn stars is going on about how he's going to fuck the girl at the back of the car. And then starts screaming, "Do you want me to fuck this car? Do you want me to fuck this car?"
Isn't that also the same scene where the other like stripper or hooker, not really sure who she is in the back seat of the car with Eve, and is just assaulting Eve for the entire scene?
Is super horny about everything that's occurring, and is trying to get into Eve's pants by force.
And it's just so blasé about it as well. Like
it's unhinged.
Even Eve's reactions to it, she's not like truly terrified or aggressive. She's just like, "Oh, just leave me alone," just pushing her away.
She does knock her out eventually.
She does, yeah, she does. Well, after the woman removes her handcuffs, that woman does actually serve something of a purpose to the plot.
There is no purpose to the plot in this movie. What are you talking about? Nothing serves any purpose other than to be the next demented scene in this unhinged saga. This Shakespearean drama.
Well, to try and actually like put a cap on the story of this movie, if we can, because
the Shakespearean drama of this movie.
I mean, you could argue this movie is in acts, each one ending with Chev having to juice himself up in increasingly more ludicrous ways.
This is a saga of family, of revenge, of blatant racism.
It's definitely a saga, is what I'll say.
For a movie that is about 80 minutes without the credits, God, it feels long.
And the fucking credits as well. Those credits go on for an eternity.
Yeah, there's like a solid 10 minutes of credits or something at the end.
Intercut with really shit bloopers, may I point out.
Yeah, shit bloopers, yeah. Not even good.
I also read as well, apparently they shot nearly 300 hours worth of footage for this movie. How? How did they shoot that much footage?
And more to the point, why?
Yeah, why? Why? Like, you had $20 million. You could have done anything else.
No, they shouldn't have done anything else, because Crank 2 is a masterpiece. I mean, we should probably talk about this movie in a more critical sense. We've just been yelling about the things that occur in it.
But Aidan, that's all we ever do.
I know. Sometimes we get a little deeper. I want to know, Mark. Crank 2 is a piece of art. How did this piece of art... I mean, with Crank 2, it's not really relevant to say how did this piece of art affect you. It's more like, where did this piece of art touch you on the doll?
In my no-no places.
Yeah.
But I wasn't mad about it. So...
What I'm getting at is, did you like this movie, Mark?
Begrudgingly, yes.
Yeah.
Begrudgingly. I would like to point out that I had seen bits of it before. I'd never seen the entire movie. This is the first time I've seen it from beginning to end. I'd seen the shotgun rape. I'd seen that. And I'd seen Rhea's introduction, because that happens quite soon after that. So I saw like a sort of 15, 20-minute chunk of the movie. But I always remembered those scenes, as you can imagine.
It's a memorable
film.
I
will say... Yeah, exactly. And what I will say is, like, I enjoyed it because I love trash. I love this particular kind of trash. I like stuff that's very... edgy's not really the word, because this has gone so far beyond the idea of being edgy, I think. It's so crass and, like, so unapologetically vile.
Yeah.
And I definitely kind of vibe with stuff like that.
I think it's kind of one of those things where it's, like, it's hard to even take it seriously as, like, offensive material, because it's so offensive.
Far beyond the pale. It's so far beyond, and it also, it's offensive to pretty much everyone, so therefore I feel like that cancels itself out, because it's just so unpleasant.
And I think the film also does go to lengths to show that, like, Chev Chelios is a piece of shit. Like,
oh yeah, he's racist, he's homophobic, like
that's the theme of the movie, really. As much as they're also like, he's got a big dick and all the rest of it, like, he is a piece of shit. Like, that is made clear in the movie.
Yeah, I like the fact that he's not shown to be a protagonist that anyone could possibly idolise as well, because you get that a lot with these. The
last shot of the movie is literally Chev flipping the audience off,
which I think is very indicative of the filmmaker's intentions.
Yes.
But to put a slightly like to sort of put more of a critical eye on it, one thing I'll say is, like, the performances in this movie are they're dedicated. Like, everybody that is in this movie clearly gets the material.
Yeah, they know what movie they're in. I mean, half of them are in the first one, so.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
But what I will say is, I think this is probably my favourite performance by Jason Statham in anything. Yeah. Because he's just so committed to the part. And
well, he's always been better at comedy than straight drama, I think.
Very true. Like, he is good in, like, Snatch, I think. Like, he's good in that, but he doesn't... He's very one level in that movie. Whereas here, he gets quite a broad range of things to do. And some of the stuff they get him doing in this movie... Yeah. It's fucking questionable. Again, like, that scene with him and Amy Smart shagging at the race course is just ludicrous. Like, can you imagine, as, like, you know, as we do, we have made movies before. Like, can you imagine directing actors to do that?
No, only in my wildest dreams. One thing, actually, we do need to address, speaking of this movie's representation of groups of people. As an open and proud member of the LGBT community, Mark...
Your friend has the gay condition.
How did you feel their representation of gay biker gangs was? Accurate to your experience?
Wow, okay, I'm fully being targeted in this, aren't I? I mean, let's put it this way. Nobody gets well represented in this movie. Nobody.
I think the gays save the day. They're the cavalry at the end.
The gays do, but also so do the strippers and all these, like, you know, minority groups that have not been, I wouldn't say personally victimized by Chev as such.
No, but by the gangs.
But, like, his actions have caused harm to them, much in the same way, you know, a lot of straight white males do cause that anyway.
Yes, that is definitely the point that Crank 2 was making.
No, I'm not going to even try and apply any kind of.
No, I think you should. Let's do this. The end of the movie is semiotically representing the underclasses of this crime-infested city. No, one bit I do love is that when Venus is on the phone to his gay black biker friends, you see the fetish club they're in, and it is some unhinged shit is happening, and there's just a guy being led around on a lead getting like beaten up basically, and there's a great line where the guy on the phone is like, "Oh yeah, we look after our own. We're a family. We may be a freaky ass family, but we're still a family." I
like that line a lot, actually.
And then
it was quite sweet.
The gay bikers and the Asian hookers do show up at the end as the cavalry. They save Chev, kind of.
They do,
yeah.
And you know, they kind of reclaim the city, as it were, and that's kind of like weirdly nice.
Yeah, they reclaim the city from the Mexican mob ? One of whom is a head in a jar. This
is what I wanted to point out.
Who is only being kept alive so that he can watch his brother whip Chev Chelios to death.
Because that's something else that happens in this fucking movie.
Yes. The guy who fell out of the plane, it was foreshadowed when they said a second body survived. Yes, they use Chev's special heart to keep... No, they don't, do they? Because they give the heart to... Long Dong Fuck or whatever he's called.
No, they just keep the main antagonist in the first movie.
So
his head is alive, just in a tank.
That's completely right. Yeah, how could I forget? Yeah, because yes, David Carradine has the heart, making the whole heart plot line completely irrelevant.
Also, just
his heart is retrieved off screen
by Chocolate. Yeah, Chocolate is the one that finds his heart,
and he never gets it back because, well, he gets supercharged by electricity at the end, so he can kill all the bad guys. But he's on fire.
Very unconvincingly, may I point out.
No, look towards me. And then
it's one of those things. Modern film has this weird fascination with shit, cheap-looking CGI fire, and it's always terrible.
But can we talk about the ending where he's on fire, hallucinates Amy Smart, but actually it's Bai Ling's character stood there, and he forcibly makes out with her, flips off the camera, and then that's your movie, right? Like there's...
We're also forgetting to point out that he forcibly makes out with Rhea, but also sets her on fire in the process, seemingly killing her, and then flips off the audience. Because, if anything, that's, the term a fuck you ending.
Yes.
It's like a literal case here.
This is a fuck you movie.
Yeah, but then, over the end credits, there is this scene that plays out showing Chev's heavily charred, heavily bandaged corpse. Yes. As Doc removes the electric heart and puts in his original heart, and it looks like he's not made it, and Eve's crying, and like weirdly dark and serious, that scene as well. Like the actual surgery is really icky. And
it's grim,
really gross looking. And then we properly end on the bombshell that Chev's alive, because of course he is.
Yeah, because they have threatened to make Crank 3 for a while.
But I guess given because this movie didn't make as much money as the first one did. No. Because I've got the figures up here actually, so I can actually say. So budget was 20 million. The movie made 34.6. So I'm assuming the 20 million in the budget there is not accounting for marketing and stuff like that and distribution. Yeah. So likely this movie didn't really make any money, and probably because I imagine bad word of mouth. Yeah,
well that's the thing. You say bad word of mouth, but it's got to a point where this movie is definitely a cult favourite. Like, I feel like every bad or weird movie podcast covers Crank 2 at some point. So it has a life of its own outside of the Crank franchise.
And in my experience, I think more people have affection for this one than they do the first one.
Yeah, because no one remembers the first one. If you talk to people about the Crank movies, it's always going to be Crank 2.
Because, it is just so ridiculous and puerile and stupid and offensive, and there's many, many more words I could use to describe this movie, which I begrudgingly really liked.
I think it's... Yeah, I mean... Okay, let's get into it now then. Kino or the Inferno for Crank 2? The electricity-induced Inferno.
I like that. I feel like I'm gonna have to... I feel like I can't in good consciousness give this movie Kino. However,
it feels wrong, doesn't it?
It feels very wrong. I feel like it's very wrong for me to give this movie Kino. But at the same time, I can't give it an Inferno because I just enjoyed it too much. I had too much fun with it.
I think what it is, right? I think this can be the official line of the podcast if you agree with this. We put Crank 2 in the Inferno, but it called us a cunt and kicked its way into Kino.
Yeah, I think, let's go with that. Because I can't willingly give it either because there are so many elements about it that I absolutely dislike and want to burn it for, but at the same time, there's so much about it that I like and I want to keep it.
I think it would refuse the burning. We couldn't put it if
it would, yeah. And it's the sort of film as well where we talked, last week about like Mystics in Bali, for example, and it's a very similar kind of movie to me in the sense like this is the kind of movie you watch with a group of friends, because it's so ridiculous.
It's a movie which primarily exists so you can go, can you believe this shit? You could show it to other people,
And honestly, I feel like you don't really get a lot of movies like that these days, or at least I haven't seen any movies like that for quite some time where I've seen something that's like genuinely kind of shocking. And
I think the closest thing I've seen to that recently, this was less shocking and more just kind of absurd, was Psycho Gorman.
I haven't seen that yet. I've wanted to. I think the only other example that I can think of, which I've still not properly seen, I've seen a bit of it, is The Greasy Strangler.
Yeah, I've not seen that yet, actually. I want to watch that. Yeah.
That film's very John Waters, though, I would say. It's deliberately going for the John Waters vibe.
Yeah,
whereas Psycho Gorman is...
Yeah, Psycho Gorman's more like unhinged Power Rangers, almost.
Yeah, how that's not won Oscars, I don't know.
It fucking should. Anyone who's listening to this, forget about Crank 2, just watch Psycho Gorman.
Double bill him. You don't need to watch Crank 1, we've already established this. Watch Psycho Gorman and treat Crank 2 as a sequel to that.
Yes, hard agree. But yeah, well, before we move on to Jurassic Park 3, I just want to say, Crank 2 is one of those movies where we touched on this in one of the Getting to Know You episodes, but in all good consciousness, in all my reasonable faculties, when I watch this movie, I know on almost every level this is a terrible movie. And I don't just mean in the way that it's put together, although that is part of it. I don't just mean in the aggressively 2000s rock soundtrack, the janky editing, the terrible cinematography. frankly quite poor acting for the most part.
Aside from Statham and Amy Smart,
I would say actually, to be
great.
fair, I think most of the actors are being terrible on purpose. They know what movie they're in. But
I also think a lot of the actors didn't natively speak English.
yes, yeah, there's definitely some Chinese accents in this that are put on.
Yeah.
Because they're like unhinged. Yeah. But what I will say is this. Yeah, it's a terrible movie. Not just in the way it's put together, but in the attitudes it represents. I think this movie is bad for society, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I think
bad for your brain.
The world would be a better place if this movie didn't exist. However, there is something about it that is very funny to me. And just knowing the kind of the rough and tumble way in which it was made. You can just watch it and you can tell that half these people are just people the directors knew. And there's just something about that is so fun to me whenever you watch a movie that's just barely held together with gaffer tape that I kind of find entertaining. And I wouldn't want every movie to be like this. But
no, not at all.
Every so often, I'm in the mood for a movie like this, and I'm glad that Crank 2 exists to scratch that itch.
It's grot of the highest order, I think.
It is grot. It's grumble. It's grot. It's filth. It should be banned for the good of the kids on the streets.
I mean, it's honestly amazing to me this movie was made in the year 2009.
Do you know what? It's not that amazing to me because the 2000s were a time of... we think of them as more politically correct than they are, I think.
I guess it's because, it was only just over a decade ago, but
Yeah.
it's so weird to think that, that long ago, you're getting a movie where Jason Statham is so openly, using the word faggot and stuff like that.
I think the thing is, though, it's very indicative of the time in the sense that, a lot of comedy, especially at that time, was being, edgy and, it's not politically correct and, that kind of thing, which you still get today, but I think people don't care for it as much today. Whereas back then,
No.
it was kind of seen as rebellious to be we're saying naughty words. Which this movie definitely does a lot.
Well, I just love the fact that the majority of Statham's dialogue in this is just him saying fuck or can't. There's even just a bit where, out of nowhere, he tries to slide down a railing and cracks his nuts into the pole and just screams obscenities for no reason.
Yeah. Well,
There's no reason for that to happen.
Well, that's Crank 2. Hopefully the listeners could make sense of that summary/review. We were mostly just yelling about things that we couldn't believe were in a movie. And that's the magic of Crank 2, to be honest with you. It's not good. It's not, and as I've said, I want to be clear, I don't just mean in terms of quality. It's not morally good. This film is morally wrong. It's bad for society. But you should definitely watch it.
Oh, you should absolutely watch it, just to say you've seen it.
So, in summary, Mark, Crank 2, sort of Kino on a technicality. A movie held together by gaffer tape and directed by Nuts Magazine.
I want to know, and I'm pretty confident I already know, I'm pretty sure this got a 5 stars from Nuts Magazine, didn't it?
I mean, we can Google it in real time.
And probably Zoo Magazine, if you remember Zoo. Or was they the same magazine?
No, I think they were sister mags.
Yeah, I remember those just grotty lads mags. Ugh.
Loaded.
Ugh.
Or my preference at the time, Front.
I don't remember Front. Which one was that?
That was the alternative cool kids lads mag. It was basically it was girls with tattoos with their tits out.
Oh, okay, it was a sort of Suicide Girls vibes.
Kind of, yeah. Maybe a bit more hipster than goth, I would say.
Okay.
But yeah, it tried to be cool because it also reviewed punk bands and stuff, alternative underground rock bands and shit. But basically, it was just the same shit. But let's look. Zoo Magazine, Crank 2. Let's see if it's on there.
Because I don't feel like the film critics working at Nuts or Zoo would take offence to any of the content in this movie.
No, they'd encourage it. I can't find a review from Zoo Magazine, but if anyone can find that,
it'll be the listeners.
Let us know in the comments.
Do a little deep dive into the grot that is Nuts
Magazine.
Magazine.
Do a little deep dive into Nuts or Zoo Magazine. That's the that's the advice of film critic and what culture contributor.
Every fucking time. Every time.
Just every time you say something sus, I want to just drop what culture in.
So, Aidan, we've talked about a movie in which Jason Statham has his bare testicles tasered and shags a woman on a race course. Do you want to talk about some dinosaurs?
Are they going to get their balls tasered?
Let's find out.
Multiple specimens that we can determine the exciting correlation between the upper palate and the larynx. This lets us theorize, mind you, that the raptor was capable of sophisticated vocalizations, which would have been a tremendous evolutionary advantage.
After his absence from the previous sequel, Dr. Alan Grant is once again thrown headfirst into a land of dinosaurs when he's hoodwinked into a search and rescue mission to Isla Sorna, which was once a testing ground for the genetic engineering that led to Jurassic Park's creation. Almost immediately after arriving at Isla Sorna, Dr. Grant and the rest of his party are besieged by dinosaurs and must try to find a way off the island before they're ripped to shreds by the local wildlife. Now, I know that's a very brief summary of Jurassic Park 3, but we should also mention that there is not really much going on in the plot department in Jurassic Park 3.
No, not at all.
That is literally the plot.
Yeah.
They go to the land of dinosaurs and, well, they fuck around and find out.
Yeah, I mean, it is... that's basically it. They rope Dr. Grant into going back to a different dinosaur island.
The one that's from The Lost World, I believe. So I'm not overly familiar with The Lost World. I've maybe seen it once or twice, and I don't really care for it.
It's not very good. But in The Lost World it's revealed there's another, like InGen had another dinosaur island other than the first dinosaur island, and the dinosaurs run amok. So this movie is about Alan Grant going to the second dinosaur island to rescue a
because
boy.
apparently, because he went to the first dinosaur island, he's like some kind of expert. Even though he is like an expert on dinosaurs anyway, like that's kind of his... That's his thing.
But he thinks he's going to do a tour for some rich people. But it turns out they're looking for their son.
Yeah, so instantly, right, I want to just before we get into talking about what goes on in the movie, Jurassic Park 3, the reason I chose this was because, I don't know, I've always really liked this movie. And I know a lot of people that do, but I've also just seen like a lot of reviews that really bash it, and I'm always kind of perplexed by that because I'm like, this movie very much knows what the audience wants and just gives it to you by the bucket load. It's like, oh, you want dinosaurs? We'll give you fucking dinosaurs, and it just gives you dinosaurs repeatedly in every orifice.
Well, I will say, watching it again yesterday for the pod, I will say I was quite bored by the second act. I didn't mind the movie, and my memory of the movie was fairly positive before I watched it again. But definitely, I mean, it's not a very long movie, but I definitely kind of was... I wouldn't say I was on the edge of my seat throughout.
No, I mean, I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to say this movie is perfect, because obviously, it's not the best Jurassic Park movie, because, the original Jurassic Park exists and will forever be the best Jurassic Park movie.
It does contain a perfect scene.
Alan.
We'll get there. Mark can't recover from...
Alan.
I really, really just want to dive headfirst in and talk about that. But I feel like we need to set up what happens before that.
I mean, it's the only scene that anyone remembers from this movie.
It's always been one of my favourite scenes in any film ever because it just completely comes out of nowhere. It's completely ridiculous, but also weirdly fitting, and watching it again for the podcast does actually have some kind of significance to the story.
Yeah.
So The problem is, every time you play it, I'm just gonna fucking crease. I love it so much.
Alan. So, we should say, right, okay, we should start by saying, so Jurassic Park 3, this is the first movie not the first movie, the first Jurassic Park movie not directed by Steven Spielberg. It's produced by Steven Spielberg. Sorry, Daffy Duck just possessed me for a minute there.
Spirit of Daffy be gone.
Yeah, so the power of Christ compels you.
The power of Christ compels Daffy Duck.
So I think I meant Porky Pig there. Anyway, the point is this. Porky Pig and Daffy Duck were not involved. Steven
but are apparently interchangeable characters.
Yes, Porky Pig has the stammer. He's like, that's all, fuckers.
Yeah, but Daffy has like the really pronounced lisp, so he like stammers over his words at times as well. Anyway, we're not talking about Looney Tunes.
Fuck you, cunt.
We're talking about Sam Neill running away from dinosaurs.
Yes, we are. And having wet dreams about them on a plane.
The best scene in any movie ever.
Anyway. Yeah, so what I was saying about the movie before we got sidetracked by Porky Pig. This was executive produced by Steven Spielberg.
Yes.
But it was directed by Joe Johnston of the Rocketeer fame.
Joe Johnston, who's a surprisingly prolific filmmaker as well, actually.
Yeah, he's kind of a workman. I'll say that. If he has any kind of tone that you would necessarily point towards, I think The Rocketeer and Captain America: The First Avenger are kind of his calling cards in the sense that he likes very kind of old school movie making.
He's very effects and set piece driven, because also looking at his other films as well, like Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. Which
of course,
really, Jurassic Park 3 really reminds me of in places, like just the way that like, the big set pieces are handled. Like a lot of the scenes with like the Spinosaurus feel like that really fucking traumatizing scene in Honey, I Shrunk the Kids where they get attacked by the scorpion. Which as a kid was genuinely terrifying.
So he's kind of one of these old school B movie directors, I guess. He kind of works in A movie budgets, but like. Certainly, I think he wouldn't he wouldn't reject that comparison, I guess. Because when you think about because I know that like the Rocketeer was kind of his passion project in some regards. When you think about that as a movie, that is very old school, very kind of 1940s pulp adventure. It's a great movie. And you can see why like that got him Captain America as well, because that's obviously the 1940s and all that. This movie, I think, definitely plays into that tradition. I think he's very much making like an old school monster movie, and there's even scenes that are very reminiscent of like Ray Harryhausen stuff, where so like the battle between the T-Rex and the Spinosaur, which is kind of early on in the movie.
Yeah.
That's shot, although it's all CGI, it's not stop motion. It's definitely shot in the manner of a Ray Harryhausen monster battle scene, where it's all very wide shot, showing off the effects, brightly lit, and it's like it's doing that. There are also some scenes that very much make use of like smoke and shadow, like the scene with the pterodactyls later on,
which is the best scene of the movie.
Pterodons of whatever kind they are, but I think it's one of the best scenes of the movie. Yeah, where they're like emerging from the fog, and it's very dramatic.
I still like to this day think. Well, we will go into that scene in more detail later, but I still to this day think that visual of the one coming out of the fog is genuinely quite creepy.
Yeah, I think it's actually unironically one of the better dinosaur reveal scenes. Pterosaur. Oh, right, okay. Oh, no, it's a pterosaur.
I'm just going to call it a pterodactyl because I don't care.
Well, a pterosaur refers to flying dinosaurs.
Oh, okay. Well, sorry for my ignorance.
I'm probably wrong about that anyway. And there's probably going to be some cunt in the comments being like, actually.
Oh, the actually people.
Or we'll just drop a fact-checking goblin in to dissuade them.
Yeah, we should probably let the goblin out. It's been a while. It's been...
Shut up, goblin.
Trapped in that cage with poor Henry.
No, Henry the Twink. That's what became of him. That's a callback.
So if you're just joining us for this episode where we talk about Crank 2 and Jurassic Park 3, you'll have no idea who my ex-twink lover is.
Ex-twink lover? Well, you heard it here first.
Oh, yeah. Updates on...
What happened? Too many Meryl Streep movies.
Too many. I couldn't handle it, mate. I was just done. Couldn't stop looking at her fucking. I couldn't handle looking at her smug fucking face anymore. Anyway, this is not about me beating him with sticks.
So Henry slammed the goblin. Slammed. Streep slammed.
Anyway, so let's backpedal slightly. So this movie, what I will say about it before sort of talking about the plot is. one of the main comparisons I would make with this movie is this movie kind of, to me, feels like what Aliens is to Alien.
Yeah.
It's more of like it's trying to be more of like a visceral, action heavy, set piece heavy, dinosaurs, humans, chaos ensues kind of thing. And I feel that's evident from the very beginning, even like down to the title card, which is like Jurassic Park, and then a claw literally rips through the words. And it's like, okay, so we're kind of leaning more into horror with this one and action and stuff. And it very much feels like it is more geared towards being a horror movie in places, but obviously it can't go the full tilt on that because it's still a Jurassic Park movie.
Yeah, well, I think the first one still has elements of horror, but yeah, this one definitely, it leans away from the kind of wonder element of it and is purely a monster movie, a survival flick.
Because the biggest example of that is the Spinosaurus, who is just a constant threat. Because in the original movie, the T-Rex is a threat, and the first scene where the T-Rex attacks him in the car is brilliant and is a really great suspenseful scene. But then after that, the T-Rex doesn't really do a whole lot until the end, where it saves the day.
Saves the day,
Yeah, whereas the Spinosaurus is just an outright villain and wants the characters dead the entire movie. And
they have the Once Upon a Time in Hollywood scene where the Spinosaurus beats up the T-Rex.
Yes, which I think is... Well, it doesn't just beat it up, it kills it. It snaps its neck.
It made me think of that scene in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood where they're talking about they bring in the new star to beat up the old star.
Yeah.
So that the new star looks cooler. Yeah. Yeah. But I think it worked.
Yeah.
Because especially when you compare it to like Jurassic World where they have the Indomitus Rex.
Yeah, so uber genetic.
It's like, dinosaur, it's big and it can think and it can drive cars and it fucked your wife. And it's like, okay, fucking calm down.
And do you know what? I reckon the Spinosaurus would well have it up.
Like, the Spinosaurus would batter that cunt.
Yeah, literally. But
Indomitus Rex slammed.
So yeah, the start of this movie, it already leads into that horror territory where you've got the people on a boat with the young kid. Is his name Kevin? Is that his name?
Something like that. We should know because they shout it about 500 times.
Yeah, that's all like Tia Leone does in this movie.
Tia Leone, there's a name for the past.
Yeah, still wife of David Duchovny?
Possibly.
Yeah.
I kind of want to drop in Obi-Wan there saying that's a name I haven't heard in a long time.
Do that.
I will.
So they're paragliding next to Isla Sorna, which, again, at the very start of the movie, they just go, restricted. Just played away. So, A, why the fuck are they there? Why have they taken a child there, is what I want to know.
Yeah, well, we need to address this, right? We've talked about the Legion of Uncles in the previous episode. I don't think this uncle, who's taken the kid to the fucking dinosaur island, he's not making it into the Legion of Uncles. He's on the Legion of Uncle wall of shame. He's disgraced. He is disgraced the role of the uncle.
For being like, hey kid, do you want to come with me to look at some dinosaurs? Which, obviously that kid would say yes. Why wouldn't he? And then we have there's this little moment at the beginning where like they end up going into like a sort of fog bank, I guess. And
hang on, I want to address the dodgy guy in the boat because the uncle character does say, I'll pay you a bit extra if we see something good. And the guy goes, I'll take you close, but not too close. And it's like, yeah, all right. If that guy is saying don't get too close, maybe don't get too fucking close.
Like,
because this is the guy who runs dinosaur fucking boat gliding.
He does Dark Tourist Dinosaur Edition. Like, that's what he does.
And he's saying don't get too fucking close. Then don't get too close, you know?
And then they go into that little like fog bank, and then the two people driving the boat just disappear. No clue how they died. They just disappear. So I'm like, okay, so aquatic dinosaurs are definitely more of a thing. We just don't see them. Apparently the movie doesn't have time for that.
Aquatic dinosaurs. That's the correct term. I won't be dropping a goblin in.
I'm going to go with water saws. Anyway.
No, that's what you get if you stay in the water too long. Water saws.
So the water saws eat these guys.
Shut up.
Water saw. # water saws. It's a thing. Anyway, so the water saws eat these guys, and then the kid and his uncle who are paragliding get cut loose and crash onto Isla Sorna.
Yeah. The uncle also promptly dies, right? Because
he dies. They find his body, I believe.
Okay, we do find his body. Yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah, no, it is his body because he's got the life preserver on.
Yeah, sorry, yeah, that is right.
Yeah, and he's been like completely skinned. Like I'm not sure because that kid's been there for what is it like 3 months, something like that, something ridiculous, like
He's
a ridiculous amount of time for that kid to have survived on that island. And that's where Dr. Alan Grant, the amazing Sam Neill, comes into it.
Yeah, that's right, because the uncle has been completely skinned, which suggests that the dinosaurs are doing it out of cruelty to send a message.
I mean, given what we learn about the velociraptors in this movie, that wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, to be fair, the velociraptors have increased in intelligence.
Like, scarily so from the previous movies, where they're just kind of... Well, I mean, in the first movie, they're not exactly dumb, are they?
But in the first movie, they're shown to have, like, pack tactics. They're intelligent survivors. And this movie implies that they do a lot of what they do just to be cunts.
And that they can talk to each other. That's a really important factor, which... we have to make a note of.
Not only can they commune with each other, they can commune with humans. As we do.
Don't do it! Don't do it!
Alan. So, like Freddy Krueger, they can enter your dreams and communicate.
So, let me get the preamble out the way so we can discuss the greatest scene in all of cinema.
Alan.
So, Dr. Grant is giving a talk on dinosaurs, like he tends to do. And I do like the fact that he asks, has anyone got any questions? And all these hands go up. And he's like, and I don't want to talk about the events of Jurassic Park.
I want to address this. This movie is about how Sam Neill doesn't want to be in Jurassic Park anymore. Because... Yes,
it is.
He started, like that's him in on a press tour, right?
Yep.
And then later on, he's like, nothing in... Oh, at the end of that scene, he's like, nothing on God's earth would get me back to that island.
Apart from money, which is the fucking reason he's in Jurassic Park 3.
Because William H. Macy's character writes him a big fat check, and then he goes back to Jurassic Park. It's like how every Men in Black movie is about Tommy Lee Jones not wanting to be in the Men in Black movies. I do want to address this because Alan Grant in this movie is misanthropic to the extreme.
Do you know what he really puts me in mind of? He's very... he's nowhere near as intense or as over the top, but he's very like Dr. Loomis in this movie, I think.
Yes.
He's very...
He's like Dr. Loomis if Dr. Loomis just hated everyone. Like, there are scenes in this movie where he's just being a prick for no reason. And I know that, like, in the first movie he's kind of surly, right? Like, he's he doesn't like kids. That's the thing in the first movie. And then he bonds with John Hammond's grandkids. But in this movie, he's got strong divorced dad energy. But anyway, we'll get to that. But this is the thing, right? Because there's another bit that made me think of this is about Sam Neill not wanting to be in Jurassic Park movies until they write him a big fat check. Because when he visits Laura Dern, who was Dr. Ellie somebody in the first movie.
She was in it, yeah.
She was in it. No, but she was like his love interest in the first movie.
Yeah, which clearly hasn't gone anywhere.
Yeah, which is kind of an interesting choice. I know a lot of people are like, "Oh, that's kind of a letdown," because the first movie is kind of about how like they are together in the first movie, and she wants kids and he doesn't. Like that's the subtext kind of underneath. And then he learns to bond with John Hammond's kids, and so it becomes it's implied that it's a possibility for him that he might want to have a family, right?
But that's not the case.
Yeah, but because like her kid is not his son, is it?
I don't think so, because she's married, isn't she?
Yes, and she doesn't, and like the son doesn't call him dad or anything.
No. Because the dad comes home at some point, doesn't he? Like,
yeah. Well, I didn't know if that. Yeah, but I didn't know if that was the stepdad or the dad. This is something I was like, is this unclear in the movie? Where like, did they have a kid and then break up, or what?
I don't believe that that's his kid. No.
Okay. In that case, it's quite weird that he's just hanging around with his ex and talking to her kid about dinosaurs. But, Alan Grant is going to Alan Grant. That's how he rolls. But what I did find funny about that is the kid calls him the dinosaur man.
Yeah.
Which clearly grates on him. He tries to get the kid to call him Alan. And then there's also a bit where he's trying to get the bird to say his name, like the parrot to say his name. And he goes, I used to remember my name. And that, again, I think is commentary on Sam Neill not wanting to be in these movies. Because everyone knows him as the guy from Jurassic Park, and he doesn't want to be known as that.
When he needs to be known as the guy from Possession. That's what he needs to be known as.
Or the guy from In the Mouth of Madness.
Yeah, exactly. Like, because Sam Neill is genuinely one of my favourite actors. So
yeah, he's great. He's
just great in everything he's in. And yeah, I actually do think I actually think you're right. I think this movie is very much making a commentary about Sam Neill not wanting to be in these fucking movies. But he clearly is not having a bad time doing this one. I think he's clearly having fun.
This is the moral of the movie, is he doesn't want to be in the Jurassic Park movies until he finds the kid on the island, right? So this whole movie is about him being like, I don't want to do any more Jurassic Park movies. It's fucking dumb, I hate it. But then when he sees how much kids love it, he's like, oh, go on then. One more.
But I think as well, like, the kid that he meets on the island is, like, every bit as kind of, like, jaded as he is in places. Like,
yes.
That kid's got some attitude. Like, compared to the kids in the first movie, I think this kid is way more likeable as a result, just because he's got a bit of sass about him.
Yeah, I can agree to that.
But also,
I think this movie does suffer from. I mean, it's clear that they just didn't have Laura Dern for much of the movie. It kind of misses her, I think.
Yeah, their dynamic is missing.
You can get away with not having Jeff Goldblum, because I think Jeff Goldblum has the classic in Jurassic Park anyway, as Ian Malcolm. He has the classic Johnny Depp in Pirates of the Caribbean thing, where everyone loves that character, so they think he should be the lead. And then when you have The Lost World, you realise, like, he's not really the lead character. He's better off as the eccentric supporting character, because in that way you can contrast him to Alan Grant, who is a more interesting character than Johnny Depp's foil of Orlando Bloom in Pirates of the Caribbean, admittedly. But again, like, that's why Ian Malcolm is so memorable, because of how he rubs up against John Hammond and Alan Grant. So when you put him in the lead, he's not really bouncing off anyone. He's just supposed to be the focal centre of the movie. So I think it's one of the key issues that The Lost World has. It's like, that character is less interesting the more you get to know him as a person. Because I think when he's just the counterpoint to everyone else, he's interesting.
I think you said about, like, this film's missing the sort of chemistry between Sam Neill and Laura Dern, and, like, their kind of dynamic and stuff. And I think this film tries to replace that with William H. Macy and Tia Leone's character. But I think their arc is a bit, I don't know, it's a bit ham-fisted for me, where it's implied that he's very cowardly and she's not about that, apparently. Being like, she married him at one point, so clearly she was into him.
Well, I think I think what I think they're going for, and I think in some scenes it works and some scenes it doesn't, is they're kind of going for this idea of, like, they're kind of seeing each other's value again because of the crisis they're in. Whereas, like, previously there were traits about each other that kind of pissed each other off. Or, So, like, there's the scene where he's on about, like, if she says to him, oh, you seem to have lost a lot of weight. And he goes, oh, yeah, I've been swimming. And she goes, oh, you don't know how to swim. And he says, I learned. So, yeah, I think there's some, like... I think there's something there. I don't think they quite extract it very well.
No.
I like those characters, though. Like,
exactly.
Yeah,
I mean, William H. Macy's great.
I like the fact they try and highball Alan Grant at the start, because they act like they're big money rustlers. That's an insane car posse film. I don't know why I said that. We'll go with that.
Yeah, that's fine. If I can have water source, you can have that.
They're big money rustlers. But and it turns out that in fact William H. Macy owns a hardware store. So he's not hard up for cash, but he certainly isn't, because there's the scene when he's introduced to Alan Grant. He's like, "Oh, I can write any number on this check to give to the Paleontology Society of America," whatever it is he works for. But okay, but let's talk about the supporting characters a little bit then, because we've got those two, a divorced couple who come together to save their kid. Yep. Very Spielbergian. We kind of get what they're going for there. Yeah, Spielberg loves a broken home. That's the thing. So,
which is very telling, I think. It's very telling.
Yes, I'm sure that this has not gone unremarked over the years, but like most of Spielberg's spiel often relies on the broken home. Sometimes coming back together, sometimes not. Blah blah blah. Right, and this is why I kind of think that Ellie and Alan Grant being separated is like not actually that far outside the realms of possibility. I think if it was a Spielberg movie, they'd get back together at the end.
Probably, yeah.
But I actually kind of like when I first saw this movie when I was a young man. When did this movie come out? Like 2003 or something?
Something like that. I mean, I saw this in the cinema when it came out. I very vividly remember going to see it because...
I mean, I didn't see it in the cinema, but I rented it from a video shop.
It's 2001 this came out, 2001.
Oh, wow, okay, yes.
Yeah.
I rented it from a video shop.
No, I saw it at the cinema.
VHS!
Because I can remember, like, when I saw the original Jurassic Park when I was quite young, I found, like, the dinosaurs kind of scary, and then I remember the prospect of going to see Jurassic Park 3 in a cinema was, like, kind of scary to me, but I ended up really enjoying the movie, so...
Yes. So, yes, in terms of the supporting characters, then, we have... we've mentioned that Ellie Sattler is in this movie, Laura Dern's character from the first one. I kind of like how they're clearly good friends, even though they've split up.
Yeah, I agree. Actually,
she says to him at the start, like, "Oh, you're still the best," and all this kind of stuff. And at the end, she's the one who calls in the cavalry.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting as well in like a sort of big budget movie to see a relationship that didn't work out. I shouldn't really say broken because I guess it's not, but like a relationship that didn't work out that actually has like a positive outcome at the end of it. Because usually, like in a lot of other movies, that would be they'd be bitter at one another or there'd be like a lot of unresolved stuff between them. But in this movie, they clearly get along and like he's happy to be around her kid and stuff. So
yeah. And her husband's clearly happy for him to be around as well. Like he doesn't.
Yeah.
The only other example in a mainstream movie I can think of, and this is one of my favourite Marvel characters, is the stepdad of Ant-Man's daughter. Because
yes.
And like those movies are not exceptional movies, but what I like about them is the supporting cast and like they're kind of just fun little romps.
Yeah.
But I fucking love, in fact, how the stepdad in the second one especially is just super into Paul Rudd. He's just like, he just loves the guy. He's just like, I just think he's a swell guy, you know? Like, he's fucking Ant-Man, that's cool. Like...
Got a little bit of a man crush on him, yeah.
Yeah, but I like that element. Like, there's something that I think is kind of mirrored in Jurassic Park 3. It's like, yeah, clearly everyone still thinks like Alan's a great guy and he's cool and everything, but it just hasn't worked out, you know?
Yeah.
They wanted different things, clearly. And also, you can see there's a difference between those two characters because he brings up like, you know, what do you think about going back to, you know, what you know, do you imagine the dinosaurs and stuff like that? And she kind of says like, I don't like to think about it. So she's clearly at a point where she's trying to put that behind her, whereas he's got some unresolved issues with Jurassic Park.
He does, yes.
He needs to go back. That's the conversation between Sam Neill and Laura Dern, where she's like, I don't have to.
You know, she's worked with David Lynch a bunch of times. Like, she's sad.
Yeah,
like,
I'm a real actor. I'm going to be in the least controversial Star Wars movie of all time in a decade.
She's going to be voicing Bill Burr's wife in a really, really racy cartoon. Yeah.
Yes, the Netflix animated sitcom that he just keeps rolling in, baby.
Other supporting characters, though, we have Billy.
Yeah, so this is Alan's assistant.
Yes, who introduces Alan to the idea that velociraptors can communicate because he does like a 3D printing of their like vocal chamber.
Yeah, that was weird. I didn't realise we had 3D printers in the year 2001.
I'm not entirely sure we did. I think it might be that movie magic we hear about sometimes.
Oh, wow, okay. So they invented the concept for Jurassic Park 3. I keep saying Jurassic World as a cancer.
Yeah, why do you keep saying that movie? It sucks.
Chris Pratt? I don't know why I just said that as if that was supposed to negate it being a bad movie. If anything, he's the worst aspect of the movie.
As he is in many of his movies, but we're getting sidetracked in slamming Pratt. Billy, that's where we were going before we went on.
Yeah, so Billy is Dr. Alan Grant's assistant, a paleontologist.
And aside, he's kind of one of the only characters who moves the story forward in any kind of significant way once they arrive on the island, because he is a bad man. Billy is a bad man because he steals velociraptor eggs.
He's sus.
He's very sus. He steals those eggs. So, yeah, he's a bit of a wrong'un. And so he steals these fucking eggs. And so, therefore, a pack of velociraptors just start chasing them down throughout the movie.
Yes.
They become like a more recurrent threat, and so fuck Billy is what I'm saying. Like, he's a dickhead.
Yeah,
like,
Billy fucked up, but he dies, so it's fine.
he doesn't die.
Yeah, he fucking does.
No, he doesn't. He's alive at the end.
Who fucking dies then, cunt?
Basically, the characters who you don't really get to know their names die. So when they first arrive on the island, two of the guys
Mate, are you sure Billy doesn't die? Because I swear to God he dies.
Billy is alive at the end.
Did I stop paying attention at a crucial point?
You probably did. After
I
the
thought he
spider.
dies because I thought he dies at the pterodactyl bit, maybe.
No. He's alive. He's seriously injured, but he's alive. I've got it here on Wikipedia. They discover that Billy.
I'm looking at it.
They discover that Billy, while seriously injured, has also been rescued.
Well, that's shit. Should have fucking died.
I mean, he probably should have, but you know, this movie's a PG. Was it a PG or a 12? This movie.
I don't care. That's the level of fact-checking quality you get from Kino Inferno. It's whether I can be bothered to look it up.
Well, I mean, yeah, so we've talked about the characters and talked about the plot, really, but I mean, this movie is all about the dinosaurs.
So all the people who die straight away are just like random mercenaries, right?
Yeah, they're mercenaries.
Well, except they're not even mercenaries, it turns out.
Yeah, you find out that they're not. Yeah, they're just sort of hired jockeys that will kind of do anything.
Yeah, and they didn't realise that he was kidnapping Alan Grant either.
Yeah, which...
Oh, yeah, because one of them... Yes, how could I forget? One of these guys gets one of the most brutal deaths in the movie, where he's running towards the plane won't slow down because the pilot's like, fuck this, we need to get off this island. And then the Spinosaurus just jumps out of nowhere and bites the cunt in half. And then, like, blood just splashes along the fucking windows.
That does happen.
Jesus Christ.
This is what I like about the Spinosaurus, and this is why he's best dinosaur in the Jurassic Park canon of villains, because he is ruthless, he just constantly hunts them down, and he will just stop at nothing. It's a shame that the way they defeat him is really kind of bullshit, though.
Yeah, I've got to say, the Spinosaurus has the Sigma male grind set throughout this movie.
Wow. Wow.
This podcast is getting sus. Look, if there's any beta males listening to this, you're fucking soy boy cooks. Only Sigma males on Kino Inferno.
But I mean, I will admit, like, yeah, I will lobby my biggest complaint of this movie is the final scene where they kind of square off against the Spinosaurus is a bit weak.
Yeah, it's a bit
They kind of just spook it away with fire.
Yeah, it's a bit naff,
Basically,
really,
yeah. Like, that's what
Yeah.
they really do. When that, obviously,
I mean,
like,
clearly they should have built a mech.
I feel like 2 T-Rexes should have come out of the woodwork and killed it. Like,
Yeah, I mean, it's not as dumb as Jurassic World where they summon the T-Rex to beat up the Indominus Rex.
yeah, because
And
that's
it's the same fucking T-Rex. And it's stupid. It's stupid. I hate it.
Yeah, but I do like the scene towards the end where the Velociraptors corner the survivors again, and they have to give them the eggs back. I really quite like that scene because I don't know why I find that even though the Spinosaurus is great and he's like a great like force of evil, I think the Velociraptors are a bit more intimidating because they're smart. Like any of the scenes where they get attacked by Velociraptors are a lot more intense, I think.
Yeah. My only complaint about that is that in this movie they really emphasise how intelligent the Velociraptors are, but they never show one reading a newspaper and smoking a pipe.
This isn't Gremlins.
That's exactly what I wanted in this movie. Because there's a whole theme in this movie where, like, he 3D prints the Velociraptors, like, vocal cords or whatever. And they talk about like, how the Velociraptors had a kind of language that they could speak to with one another. I wanted them to cut to a Velociraptor wearing glasses, reading a fucking newspaper. He's like the brain gremlin from Gremlins 2. I mean, are you saying that wouldn't make this movie an instant 5 stars?
I mean, we already have the Velociraptor saying...
Oh, yeah, sorry, I've not got it ready. Alan.
So I guess, glasses-wearing Brainosaurus is not too far outside the realms of possibility. We've kind of gone around the houses on this one, I think. I mean...
This has been quite a loopy episode. So not the usual level of penetrating, deep criticism that we normally do.
No, but again, I mean, we're discussing good, bad sequels, I guess. So, I mean, you can't really...
I mean, unless you've got anything you desperately want to add about Jurassic Park 3.
All I'd really say about it is I just think it's quite a fun movie. I will agree with you. It does kind of sag in places a little bit.
I will say it's kind of the ideal like hangover movie in the sense that if you by hangover movie, I mean I'm borrowing this phrase from a much better podcast. We Hate Movies. Check it out. But why are we always promoting things that are bigger than us? Anyway,
they gotta suckle at their teats to get nourishment, so they promote us. That's why.
But they define it as like a movie where if you fall asleep for a 20-minute stretch, it doesn't really matter. But it's broadly pretty entertaining. And I
see that. Yeah.
I would put Jurassic Park 3 on that category, where it's like if I was pretty hungover when I was watching this and I just kind of zoned out for 20 minutes to half an hour, it wouldn't matter. But at the same time, as I'm watching it, I'm kind of like, this is pretty fun. There's nothing in it that's too aggressively stupid that it puts me off. It has the great scene where he goes, Alan, that's good.
10 out of 10.
Objectively the best scene in cinema.
Absolutely. But it's also, I think it's just full of really great little moments as well. Like one of my favourite moments is like sort of cheesy as it is the scene where the characters meet up on the different sides of the fence and then they hear the phone ringing, and obviously the phone was in the pocket of the dude that the Spinosaurus ate. And I just like that scene where they're like, oh, well, I don't have the phone. Where is it? And they turn around, the Spinosaurus is just there looking at them. I think that's
a
great.
Fun scene. Yeah, that is a fun
that's
scene.
Just great because that's very much a horror movie trope.
Yeah.
And I like that.
It does have the thing where this massive dinosaur can apparently sneak up on people. That is a Jurassic Park trope.
Don't think about it. Yeah, don't think about it. But yeah,
the same thing happens. The same thing happens in the first one. It's even more egregious because the T-Rex, right, in the first one, it's introduced that when the T-Rex moves, famously, it shakes the glass of water in the car.
It does,
like,
yeah.
You feel the vibrations. And yet, in the final scene of the movie, this T-Rex performs a sneak attack. It appears out of nowhere, despite the fact that the rest of the movie makes it very clear that if the T-Rex is coming towards you, you can feel it coming towards you before you see it.
Yeah, that is one of those like famous movie moments that bugs me because it does completely break the film's logic.
I mean, it's kind of like how in any Godzilla movie, sometimes Godzilla just appears out of nowhere, despite the fact he leaves a trail of devastation in his wake at any other point.
I do also love the reveal of the T-Rex in this movie where they sort of push apart the bushes and there's this like giant corpse, and then the T-Rex just sort of lifts its head up. And it's a bit where Dr. Ranch goes, don't move, and everyone just fucks off.
Yeah,
I always think that's great.
It's a callback to the first one, I guess.
It is, yes. I also like the other callback as well where they're having to rifle through the Spinosaurus shit to find the phone.
Yes, I had that in my notes, actually. I forgot to mention that.
That's a fun scene.
Kind of... I thought the callbacks were okay as well. Like, it wasn't one of those movies where it's super egregious and the callbacks are, like, so obviously the thing. Because, like, I was watching that scene where they rifle around in the shit for the phone, and I was like, oh, yeah, this is kind of a callback, I guess. But it's kind of the thing where, like, unlike the T-Rex scene, it's natural that the T-Rex appears and you have a callback to that scene because, like, that is something Alan would say in that scene. He would say,
literally.
Don't move, you know. It is a bit of a callback. But, it kind of... to contrast with something that I thought was an egregious callback and something I watched recently, Mark's going to roll his eyes as soon as I say these two words. But I was watching a recent episode of Doctor Who, and... I'm
not going to massively roll my eyes, but go on.
But, and there's an episode where they brought back, the Weeping Angels.
Oh, yes, I heard about this.
And it was a good episode, actually, surprisingly, for Modern Who. But one of the things that was kind of egregious about it was they constantly said the phrase, don't blink, don't blink, don't blink, don't blink, don't blink. Even after they'd already established, like, these are the rules. You don't have to tell all the characters over and over again. They just kind of constantly said that because that was, like, the famous thing from the original Weeping Angels story, Blink, obviously.
Yeah.
The Doctor says, don't blink. Not even a little bit, or whatever it says. So, yeah, I kind of thought, like, if Alan had said, like, its vision is based on movement, which is the line from the first movie, then it would have felt egregious. But the fact that he's just calling back to what the T-Rex does, rather than...
because I think this movie isn't trying to, like, insult the viewer's intelligence in that way, I think.
No, this is kind of before the time as well when, like, callback humour was all that sequels were there for.
Because there's a couple of really good little gags in this movie. Like, one of my favourites is the fact that the Spinosaurus is technically the second most evil dinosaur in this movie because Barney is in this movie. Because when they're trying to call for help when the Spinosaurus is attacking them on the boat, and obviously the little kid, Laura Dern's kid, picks up the phone and they're like, say, go get mummy, and he gets distracted by Barney. They nearly die because of that fucking purple dinosaur.
Yes.
The most evil dinosaur.
The most evil dinosaur. So I think we've gone around the houses a bit on Jurassic Park. I think we've burnt ourselves out on Crank, to be honest, because like how do you follow on from Crank? Sorry, we burnt ourselves out on Crank, Mark. Is that something you want to have on the record? That phrase?
I didn't think of that.
I mean, what culture, if you're listening, Mark Smith burnt himself out on Crank today.
What can I say, mate? I'm just a secret method. Anyway.
Aren't we all?
Yeah. But no, so what we say, Jurassic Park.
Hashtag secret method army.
Meth heads unite.
That's what our fan base could be called. Every fan base needs a cute little nickname. And so ours are the secret methods.
And I reckon, right, if we get enough of us, we could easily take down that Spinosaurus. We could beat him up.
I thought you were going to say we could take down the government.
I mean, why not both?
Why not both?
Watch this space, listeners. Meth heads. We're calling meth heads.
Secret methods.
Secret methods. Sorry, my mistake.
It's either that or the Thackeray Binkses, and that's... we don't need that.
So, Aidan, Jurassic Park 3, what are we saying? Kino or Inferno?
Well, I mean, this is one of those movies where... I know you have a soft spot for this movie, and I have to admit, it's the best Jurassic Park sequel by some margin.
But that's not saying much.
That is saying very little. This movie is pretty mediocre for the most part. It has some good elements, don't get me wrong, and some of the dinosaur and a lot of the dinosaur stuff is great. It thoroughly is what it is, which is just a B movie about dinosaurs, with some characters from a movie you saw in the 90s. That said, as I said, it's a perfect hangover movie, so I can't necessarily confine it to the Inferno, but it is a binary rating system, and I can't really give it Kino. So what I'll say is, we'll pop it on a sort of string, and we'll dangle it over the Inferno. But if we've had a bit too much, if we're a bit the worse for wear, we'll pop it out and we'll watch it. But then it's going back in its box that's hanging over the Inferno.
I like that. I'm gonna go with a soft Kino on this, just because I do really like this movie. I've got a bit of a soft spot for it, like you said. But I feel like
this rating system is getting increasingly meaningless with every episode.
I've always felt that way. But no, it's definitely got its fair share of problems. But the elements of the movie that I like, I think outweigh those for me personally. And it's just, again, it's a solid 90 minutes. It's something that I can just pop on and watch and enjoy. And it's got lots and lots of dinosaurs in it. And
it do have dinosaurs. If you want
lots of dinosaurs.
It do have dinosaurs. We cannot fault it for that.
No. I mean, I feel like Crank 2 would have been better if it had dinosaurs in it.
I mean, I won't rule it out of Crank 3. I feel like there must be dinosaurs in Crank 3.
It's just Statham punching raptors in the face. I'm well into it.
Oi! I mean, maybe that's how they can save the Jurassic franchise, right? Is just meld it with Crank.
It's just a bunch of velociraptors with the gay condition. Your raptors have the gay condition. I mean, maybe that's it. Maybe that's how the next one will start. They've all gone lesbian. Because they're all female dancers. They've all gone a bit lesbian. For some reason, that means Jason Statham has to get involved. But no, that's it. Okay, this is it, right? So the dinosaur population is dying out. And InGen want to save the dinosaurs so they can still have a theme park. But all the dinosaurs have gone lesbian, so they're not breeding. Life is not finding a way. Are we just gonna call them Lick-a-Lot-a-Puss? I feel like we have to.
The Lick-a-Lot-a-Puss, yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna have to.
But this is the thing. Jason Statham, as we know, has an interspecies level of semen. He can breed with any creature on God's earth. And not only that, he will sexually pleasure any creature that he has intercourse.
Even lesbian raptors.
Yeah. So
who are very picky lovers, may we point out.
Yeah, so Statham gets airdropped into whatever the island's called, Elsa Major or whatever. Dropped onto it, and he has to go around breeding with every creature. Meanwhile, he's only doing this because he's got a new heart that if he doesn't 5 times every hour, will explode.
And
so it is both a Crank sequel and a Jurassic Park sequel.
And I'm just going to throw out that Amy Smart's character is going to always be watching from the bushes, because as we know, she's into horsecock, so she probably likes watching Jason Statham just raw dogging these raptors.
Well, there's going to be the obligatory T-Rex Statham Smart threesome scene.
So producers, if you're listening, give us money.
If you're listening, Jurassic Crank. You heard it here first.
So I'm going to say goodbye now because I need to purge myself of everything that you've just said.
Okay, we can end the podcast here, listeners. It's goodbye from Mark. It's goodbye from me. And you know who else it's goodbye from?
Oh, God.
Alan.
All right, let's get straight to the biscuits. At 0800 hours this morning, an American soldier was eaten by a Nazi dinosaur.
That's a Tyrannosaurus Rex.
No, Claire, that's a Tyrannosaurus Rex. Try thinking first before you open your mouth.